Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hopefully we have a full audience now. Hopefully you've all joined us and found a seat. Welcome to this second of this series of Transport Technology Forum Fireside Chats. This is our second one, and we're looking at a review of a very strange year this afternoon. So I've got some guests with me. We've got 55 minutes roughly to just have a chat about some of the things that have been happening in this year. So I'm going to start off with a quick introduction, and then I've got three people who will join me for a talk about some of the things they've found this year as in their employment in the transport sector. So I've got Dominic, Paulo, who's director for Europe and Middle East in the public sector for INRIX. I've got Hannah Tune, who's ITS development manager for Transport for Greater Manchester, and I've got Karla, Jakeman, who's innovation lead for connected transport at Innovate UK. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that we've found this year. And I don't want this to be too heavy a session. It's getting a bit too near Christmas for heavy sessions and lots of facts and figures. But this is just a think really about what's happened this year and what we've found, and maybe some thoughts about how we're moving forward into the new year. So I don't think any of us would be surprised to with the title that this is a review of a strange year. It has been a very, very strange year. I think the one thing we can say for certainty is any of us sat here where we are now a year ago wouldn't have been in any way able to predict what would happen in 2020. It's been odd and mad and strange in so many ways across society, but also particularly as we're interested today in terms of transport. And there are things that have happened this year that we could have never predicted have happened. I don't think I would have ever predicted to hear a Prime Minister stand up in Parliament and urge people not to use public transport. I think that's something that we would never in our lifetimes have expected to see. I don't think we would ever have imagined a situation where we would have almost renationalised the railways without anybody really noticing, but that's pretty much what we've done this year. The way that policy's been delivered has been accelerated by many years. The speed at which we've introduced micromobility into some of the UK cities, the way that we've had debates in cities about reallocating road space, about accommodating wider and greater pedestrian areas, about altering the way that traffic flows, about altering the way that we accommodate cycling and walking. We've achieved things in a matter of months that we would have expected 5 years worth of policy debate around. And I think that's had good and bad impacts. I think particularly around the Transport Technology Forum, those of you that follow the forum will be aware of the COVID data project. We've gone from zero to a very comprehensive English national data set of local authority traffic and travel data. We did that in about 3 or 4 months, and that was the Department for Transport. That was our initiative that was delivered through the Transport Technology Forum and delivered with partners at ARUP, who put a lot of work into building and developing this tool, and working with the local authorities and working with companies like INRIX to collect data that already existed and build it into a national data set. And that's something that will last beyond COVID. That's something that's an opportunity that we've seen that we can grasp. And I think we've seen a number of those over the years. We've seen a number of opportunities that we can grasp. And I think among all the uncertainty and tragedy of what's happened in 2020, I think we've seen some useful policy changes, some things that will be of benefit in the future. But of course, we're still in the middle of COVID. We have a long way to go. We have the potential of the first vaccines now with us. We have the potential for that to change things hopefully in 2021. But really changing things fundamentally, changing things about how the UK's transport network gets back to some sort of normal is still a good few months away. We still have a good few months of this to go. As we saw today with the announcement in Parliament of increasing the number of areas that are in tier 3 of lockdown. And this means that we have to continue doing what we do. We have to continue being creative and working to some very odd deadlines and very odd pressures to ensure that the transport network meets the challenges. And then, of course, around us, any of us that are listening to the news will be aware of the bigger changes that may be coming in society. You know, it may be a very long time, if ever, before we see a return to commuting like we had before COVID. The whole work-life home office balance is likely to change. The way that people travel around in cities is likely to change. The way that people think about long distance travel, particularly air travel, may well take many years, if ever, to return to where it was. This means that the transport network that emerges from the COVID crisis, the profession that we work in and the challenges that we face will be different. And we will have to work out new ways of doing things. We will have to work out new business models for how public transport works. We may well have to think differently about how traffic on our streets is managed and what traditional traffic looks like. And one of the things that we found through the COVID data project that we've been doing is that traffic didn't appear as the first lockdown ended through the summer. Traffic didn't appear to return to where it was, and maybe that was because COVID is still going on. Who knows if it will return to where it was at the end of this? That fundamentally affects the way that we think about rush hours, the way we think about transport network capacity, about the way we utilise assets in transport. These are all things that will have changed for good, I would imagine. And similarly, I think people's expectations. I think the expectation of how we use public transport will take a long while to get back to a normal. The expectation of being able to use micromobility, expectation of how such things as mobility as a service and shared use, demand responsive transport, how these solutions, how these potentials in the future evolve and how they come to market will be different, I imagine, than we would have predicted a year ago. And I think these are all things in the longer term we need to be thinking about. We are, of course, still in a world where things are changing daily, and I think this is something that many of us have found challenging. That not only do we have to plan for a fundamentally changed business model, a fundamentally changed environment that we work in, that one that may not change back to where it used to be, but we also have to handle sometimes daily hurdles and keep networks running and keep things operating on a daily basis. And I know many people working in local authorities have put fantastic work in to keep that happening, to keep the transport networks running, working with their suppliers and industry to keep things happening. And this is still happening. Some of you may have seen the last few hours, a story has come out that there's likely to be large-scale train cancellations in the west of England because of a COVID outbreak today among Great Western Railway drivers. Now that means that the number of trains that run will be reduced. That wasn't predicted this morning. That's happened today, and that's kind of symptomatic of the sort of things we're seeing, the sort of challenges that many of us in transport are having to face. And then, of course, strangely in the background, getting only maybe 5% of the news coverage that it should do, is the story that we all thought would be the big story this year, and that's of course leaving the EU. Now that, as we all know, happens in a matter of days. In a matter of days, our relationship with the EU fundamentally changes. We may have a deal, we may not. We don't really know what that means in terms of traffic at ports. We don't know what that means in terms of international passenger travel. We don't know what that means in terms of freight. For colleagues who work in areas such as Kent and Hampshire, around Portsmouth and other ports that are around in Essex and places, that potentially means a huge challenge around transport. And again, Brexit, in a more wide sense, will alter the way the UK functions, and it will alter the way transport functions. And this is something else that we have to be ready for. This is something else which is coming, which may well alter the way things work, and it may well be another way in which the transport network that we all work in, that we plan and maintain and improve and invest in and write policies around and think about commitments for, this will change fundamentally. You may also be aware that this week the High Court amended a coroner's court ruling around a young girl who tragically died a number of years ago in London, and made it clear that her death was directly related to air quality. She lived near the South Circular and in London, and after many years of campaigning, her family have quite rightfully had her cause of death changed by a second coroner's hearing to include air quality as being a cause of death. Now, this again is a massive challenge for all of us. We were working towards air quality management areas before COVID hit. That was something that was coming. The ability to charge in certain parts of the country to mitigate air quality. You could say that will be less of an issue now because traffic levels will drop. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe COVID will have an effect on that. Maybe it won't. But fundamentally, the link between public health and the link between individual health and air quality has been confirmed. What we've known for a long while has now been confirmed. And as public bodies, that means we have a much more serious need to think about air quality going forward. We have a much more serious need to think about how our policies affect that. That's a seismic change, I think, in the way that we think about travel in cities and transport in cities. And then you fold into that increasingly tight deadlines around the end of petrol and vehicle diesel sales, around decarbonisation, around removal of carbon fuels from the railways, around electrification. And we are moving into a world of real change over the next few years. the innovation that we think about today and the work that we're doing today is going to be crucial in doing that, in getting out of where we are now, in dealing with exiting the EU, in dealing with air quality, dealing with decarbonisation. These are all issues that may be leading us to as challenging a few years in transport as we've maybe ever faced. Now, I think that's all to come, and I think the best thing we can do to help equip ourselves for that is knowledge sharing. And I think bodies like the Transport Technology Forum, bodies that allow people such as the group we have gathered today to gather together and exchange information, exchange knowledge, think about the future. That as an industry is going to be one of the key ways in which we get through this, and one of the key ways in which we respond to the challenge that society is going to set us over the next few years. So on that note, and with no pressure to my gathered panel, and I won't be disappointed if we don't solve all the problems I've just outlined in the next 50 minutes. But if we can, that would be good. But I think just thinking about that backdrop of this I say incredibly strange year we've had. It would have been a strange year, I think, even without COVID, but that's hardly helped matters. In terms of this incredibly strange year we've had, what sort of experiences have you had? What sort of things have you been doing? What sort of insights have you picked up? Where do you think we may well be going? What's your view of the last 12 months? And I'd like to firstly go to Dominic and from INRIX get a data supply view of the world we currently live in.
So thanks, Darren. I mean, as you say, and I'm going to paraphrase an awful lot of kind of what you've highlighted. It has been a very strange year for all of us. On a personal note, as you mentioned, I have a role which kind of spans Europe and the Middle East. I was traveling extensively in my job from a day-to-day basis. I have effectively been grounded, and that's absolutely fine. I was very used to remote working and various other bits and pieces. And I'm quintessentially working from home now full time. I haven't been to see a client face to face since the first lockdown back in March time. And it's interestingly actually how the communications and Teams and Zoom and all of the new sort of anecdotes that come along with this mechanism in which we communicate today over that which we had traditionally, and how business has kind of evolved from that kind of a perspective, and equally how the insights from the services and products that INRIX provide. And for anybody who doesn't know what INRIX does, it's quintessentially a data as a service, software as a service company, collecting disparate GPS data across vehicles across the globe. We bring those together and we derive insights out of that by providing speeds on roads in near real time, and also providing information about origin destinations of a subset of vehicles that are travelling around so that people can gain insight. And in a traditional sense, traffic had recurrent patterns, and there was the traditional AM peak, PM peak, depending where you are. There may have been an inter-peak, and traffic behaved in a roughly the same way on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, and then it was different on a Saturday and a Sunday. And people would do the traditional type exercises of looking, well, there's problems on my network here and it's recurrent over these particular days, and what can I do? And I was helping people by providing data sets to look at these different problems. Obviously, a different set of problems has now come about as part of this strange year, and the questions have started to be different in terms of what they're looking at. Where are those people going to and from now? What's the difference it's made actually against the network? And the first set of things was actually just a dramatic, I'm going to say, fall in traffic as part of the first lockdown. In parts of the network, we saw 60% of traffic just being wiped off the network as the country was, dare I say, locked down. And then obviously, as part of that, there was slowly creeping up in terms of what we're seeing. There was a great level of interest. Unfortunately, I can't mention all of the people that were interested, but there's some very interested people interested in that kind of data, doing various types of activities associated with that, potential impacts in terms of spread and impacts to other types of activities that we all take for granted in our day-to-day lives. That provided interesting insight to them, and I was very, very busy, let's say, trying to assist for the greater good in terms of understanding what was happening as quickly as possible and providing insight, on a daily basis in terms of what had changed. And then we became back into a sort of a normal pattern as actually the lockdown bit and held, and things started to even out and steady out. And then people started thinking about different types of insights. But then the position changed again, and that derived a second set of, well, what does that now mean? So we tended to find ourselves, or what I found from a number of different perspectives, is people keeping answering different set of questions over what they would have traditionally done. Let's say last year, they were a set of standard questions that were standard within the industry and a standard across how business was conducted and how traffic engineering and various other bits and pieces was outturned. It's been strange in terms of the amount of different questions that are now being asked and how much people are leaning in on data relative to what they perhaps weren't before. So I think it fascinating, let's say, in terms of how the things have shifted and how things have evolved over time. And kind of a last part on that is actually, of late, people have actually, I personally thought, well, what actual value is there of this particular strange period that we have of deriving insight, because it's not typical. And actually, there's been an awful lot of people wanting to understand what data has actually been like since the lockdown during this COVID period because of other associated data sets. And Darren, you mentioned about environmental impacts and various other bits and pieces. There have been massive swings in terms of air quality and other bits and pieces because of the impacts associated with traffic. So actually, the value of the data is not only understanding what the impacts have been because of COVID, but equally the associated impacts through other things such as air pollution and how traffic has an impact on those. And actually, I'm going to say the value of the data that's being created over the COVID period is perhaps surpassed my expectation in terms of the value of it and what it can actually bring to us in understanding an unnormal situation in what we typically find a normal world hadn't we had COVID.
Great, thank you, Dominic. And I know you one of the companies that stepped up to the plate very early when the department asked for help with data, and I thank you for that. And I know the data that you've produced has had a great insight. Just stepping to one side slightly and thinking about Brexit. And of course, one of the great concerns of Brexit is how that affects imports and exports to the UK and how that affects our daily lives and the type of life we have in the future. And who knows? We may well see less imported goods in the future. We may well get to a situation in a few years' time in this country where foods like lasagna are once seen as dangerously foreign and exotic. Who knows if we do that? But how goods travel through ports is very important. Do you have any particular insights, or do you think that the type of service you provide could really help us with that, understand how the ports behave around this fundamental change?
So as part of the data sets that we collate an awful lot of data from freight and logistics providers, and a lot of these don't operate just on the aisle that we preside. And I do see a lot of what I would call traffic that ends up in ports and then travels across the water to other places. So yes, I do have good insight with regards to freight movements across what I would call borders, not only just from the UK to the rest of Europe, but equally across borders in Europe. And yes, there is certainly insights that I can aid with in that regard. I haven't seen anything of massive consequence yet, but obviously it's still early days in terms of what actually happens with any type of announcement. I will still continue to get my lasagna. And we are a heavy importer of goods. We are a nation of 60 million plus people, and we have a great dependency. So it's certainly interesting times to put a Brexit on top of a COVID period, and a lot of our vaccines also travel across the water, don't they?
Yeah. Good point. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the value of data will be one of the things that we never pull back from. I think we have a fundamentally greater understanding of the value of data, I think, now than we ever used to. So just going from a supplier view to a local authority view, I'd like to bring in Hannah now from Greater Manchester, and just tell us about some of the things you've been doing, some of the ways that, again, go back to the point about the way things have changed, some of the things you've been doing that you didn't expect to be doing 12 months ago.
Yeah, so I think we've had teams who have been utilising data, like Dominic's mentioned, from different sources. So looking across modes as well. So looking at kind of like bus patronage and Metrolink patronage, and trying to understand what our customers actually need. So people who did need to travel, whether we were still providing those services. And also ensuring that we're still keeping the highway network operational and that we've got our control centres still operational. But yeah, there's I think I've, in my role personally, I've probably been quite lucky because it's not as much of an operational role. It's a lot of project-based work. So, and those projects, although they've been maybe slowed down at times due to university partners maybe not being able to get into facilities or maybe like equipment and things have slowed down, and site visits and engineering capacity. I have been quite lucky that most things have continued and all the projects have continued. And maybe one project that we wouldn't have thought we'd be looking at a year ago is looking at social distancing within bus interchanges, which was an Innovate UK funded project through the business-led response to COVID. So, and that was just in terms of efficiency and moving things quickly. It was a quick turnaround on response to the competition, but also in terms of acting quickly. It was, I think it was kind of deployed in June. So it was a really quick turnaround to get things moving as well. So the actual project is looking at using existing CCTV within bus interchanges and using machine learning, humanising autonomy with the company we've been working with, and looking at interactions within bus interchanges. So where the people were complying with social distancing, and that was done at 1 metre distances and 2 metre distances. And it helped planning within the interchanges in terms of social distancing, like marking out and signage, and also where those hotspots were so they could be addressed. And I think some issues arise with like posts, and we were able to move those. So it just helped with all that. But I think going forward, it's been a positive step that it can assist in general terms, not just in response to COVID. So, and it's highlighted that use of technology as well, and the video analytics side of things. So people are more aware of that technology across the organisation and want to use that technology. We've had projects with Vivacity as well, which has used similar kind of video analytics and artificial intelligence. And that's on a more operational in terms of gathering data. So it's been really useful for gathering data on walking and cycling. And also for adaptive signal control, that project carried on. And I think if that had been further ahead, there would have been some real benefits in terms of how we could have reacted to response to COVID in terms of safety for pedestrians and cyclists as well. Also the pop-up traffic management, the AI is allowing dynamic optimization of the signals. So if those traffic management measures had been in place, the AI would have actually adapted to that. So it's just kind of interesting to see these real world kind of uses for that AI. Yeah, and so it's just good that those projects have kept going, really.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. So do you think the organisation will be more sort of data savvy, more aware of technology? And I don't mean at a sort of engineer level, I mean at sort of a senior management politician level. Do you think there's now a greater acceptance of the way that technology can help with problems in an urban area?
I think so, definitely. I think these projects have highlighted the use of technology for like day-to-day uses, but also the data side of things. It was maybe siloed before, so we'd maybe look at highway data and like footfall at like the rail stations, but all that data is kind of being gathered like from different sources and used to get a whole picture of the transport network, which I don't think has maybe been done before. So there was a real need to know what customers wanted and what that shift was. And so people who may have been travelling by bus were then cycling and looking at those patterns across the network as a whole. So it's definitely across the organisation highlighted the importance of data, but also the technology side of things as well.
Okay, and on a physical level, of course, across the country, there was a rush to widen footways, to take traffic lanes out, to bring low traffic neighbourhoods into effect. And then recently we've seen quite a bit of pushback against that, about people wanting these measures back out again and maybe not wanting them as permanent measures. Do you feel that will, do you think we'll spring back to where we were, or do you think there will be a better understanding of why reducing traffic is good, or why better facilities for pedestrians and cyclists? Do you think that will cement itself into the way we go forward?
I think we're quite lucky in Greater Manchester, because we'd already had quite a big investment in terms of cycling and walking infrastructure, and we had some big projects ongoing. But the Emergency Active Travel Fund has helped kind of push that even further, and also again on the monitoring side of things, I think it's allowed that kind of investment in monitoring as well. So you've got that evidence base to kind of say, well, this is what it was before and this is what it is afterwards. So yeah, I think there's definitely there's obviously going to be some benefits that have come out of COVID, and I think that the kind of push towards walking and cycling is definitely one of them. I think we're thinking about it in everything that we do now, even like the adaptive signal control and building in kind of cycling and kind of looking at crowdsourced data to build into the adaptive signal model. So everything's kind of gearing up towards that, and hopefully like having something that's better at the end of all this. And I think that goes for both like the mode and looking at sustainable options, but also like environmentally as well, and looking at how we come out of that in a better situation as well. Great.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a really good description of life at the coalface. So you mentioned Innovate UK. So I'd like to move over to Karla, who appears to be sat in a very, very festive hospital cubicle at the moment.
I'm not having a medical exam, Darren.
you set them in the price for the most festive hat. So.
I thought I'd make an effort, not be dreary.
You have, and we thank you for it.
So I guess my review of the year really, I want to focus on the positives, which obviously Dominic and Hannah have already mentioned a lot of. But some of the challenges, obviously, that we've had, and my heart goes out to you if you have been affected negatively by COVID. But there are some challenges that we never foresaw, such as the number of boxes we'd accumulate through all of the last mile deliveries, and some of those kind of aspects. You know, we never thought that we'd have quite so many half-empty white vans running around our towns. Because of all the last mile deliveries, when we could no longer go into the shops, for example, and people were buying very quickly instead of thinking, do I really need that tomorrow, or can I kind of bulk things up and buy them in a few days? So I think that was one of the challenges that we're seeing a lot of innovative solutions for at the moment, how we can prevent that. And other challenges I've really experienced, and Darren touched on this, is no networking. I think the last time I actually went to a meeting was probably the last Transport Technology Forum when we were in Bristol, and that seems such a long time ago. So I'm really missing seeing people, and I'm sure a lot of other people are, that, you know, we miss that face to face. So it's been a long year from that aspect, and also as Hannah mentioned, and I think Dominic did as well, the projects that the projects that we've had that have struggled as a result of COVID, you know, they've not been able to get in touch with their academic partners, for example, and we've seen a lot of poorly projects that we've managed to support Innovate UK to try and capture. So that's been a real challenge, but I think we've worked really hard to try and enable as many projects as possible to keep going. But I think that on the flip side, looking positively, there are a lot of positives that really have come out of this year that we would never have expected. I think with the innovation side, one of the really important things, and Hannah talked about the COVID competition, was the number of people who were repurposing existing innovations to the COVID war effort, if you like. And I think that was really, really great to see. That yes, we needed new innovations, but also how can I adapt my existing innovation and technology for this particular issue, whether that's getting parcels out to vulnerable people, or, you know, the reduction in public transport, whatever the issue was, how could they repurpose their existing innovation? And that competition was just immense. It was the largest SBRI we've ever done, and to give you some idea of how quickly we had to do that behind the scenes, it takes roughly about 12 weeks to get an SBRI up and running, an SBRI competition. The team did it in 4 days, and we had, I can't remember the exact number, it was about 13,000 applications. It was incredible. So we worked really hard behind the scenes. So anyone who got funded from that, congratulations, because it very, very competitive, but we saw some great things. And the other great thing we saw from that is we saw new organisations that we'd not worked with before. So we have regular organisations that we fund every now and then, and quite often we see the same organisations coming through, but we saw so many new types of organisations as well, which was great for us because it broadens our network and it helps us with that collaboration piece that, you know, we plug so much at Innovate UK. So that was really important. I think, speaking about collaboration as well, Darren mentioned the getting the data for the COVID the transport data that we were trying to get for the department, and I think the collaboration effort on that was so many organisations coming together, and we were having meetings behind the scenes with different parts of different government departments and different government departments that we've not worked with before, everyone coming together saying, how can we do this, how can we help? And then we've got this data now, what can we use it for elsewhere? And I think that collaboration, which might not necessarily have reached some of our audience today, I think was a real eye-opener of the art of the possible of what we could be doing when we're collaborating even better behind the scenes. I think active travel has already been mentioned, but I think 2021 will be the year of active travel and combo travel, so enabling people from rural areas to get to the urban areas through using some of that active travel modality. So whether it's cycling part of the way and then getting public transport when they can use it the rest of the way, or aspects like that. So how we can incorporate it to enable people to use active travel 12 months of the year, regardless of the weather. So there's a lot of safety aspects and things like that to look at, but already we're seeing great innovations as people are really starting to think about that already. So that's great to see. Touching on the air quality, we've seen some fantastic projects come to fruition from the Highways England competition that we ran, and 50% of those were for air quality. And there's been some amazing projects in there about how we can really get to grips with the data that we're seeing and to really use it as much as possible. To give you a bit of an idea about some of the other competitions, so the geospatial competition that we're running at the moment, so winners for that will be announced formally by the 8th of January. So that's another one that actually came out from the conversations with different government departments that we'd not spoken with before. So that's a perfect example, and I know there will be 28 very happy projects as a result of that. And I think that it's been touched on already, but working from home, who knew, as Dominic was saying, that you can work so much more remotely. Who knew that we could work from home as much as we are? Who knew that we could do so much more from home as we are at the moment? And that working from home has meant less traffic, less pollution. So instead of hearing the melody of traffic, we've been hearing the melody of birdsong instead. So that's always a plus. And I think two other aspects that I'd really highlight that we have done at the end of this year, that throughout this year, that we never expected. Webinar bingo. How many times have you said you're still on mute? You're still on mute. Can you see yes. the picture yet? And we've lost him. All of those different things, how many people have played webinar bingo? Never gets old. And I think one of my absolute highlights from this year is I never expected to stand up in front of 300 people and present wearing my slippers. I never thought that would happen. But, there's good things that have come out of this year. There are some awful tragedies and some huge challenges. But I think we need to focus at the end of the year on a lot of the good that's come out of this year. And, webinar bingo and slippers, they're up there.
Thank you, Karla. I think that's actually definitely something to take away from this. And I'm not going to ask the panel what they're wearing on their feet at the moment, but I'll just assume you all are wearing Bermuda shorts and slippers at the moment. So very good. Just thinking about what you've been saying about innovation, do you get a feeling that is likely to be targeted more? Innovation spend will be targeted more on meeting some of these new challenges in the coming years. Do you think that's where innovation spend is going to be going?
I think that innovation spend will, you don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I think that it's wherever it goes in the future, it's got to be based around the challenges that we've found ourselves in this year and going forward. So whether that's going to be active travel, micromobility, the car sharing and enabling car sharing and things like that to happen again. It's always going to have a COVID strand through it, I think, where we go forward, which we weren't expecting, but is to some extent a positive thing, because it's making us think harder about how we can do things better and differently.
Thank you, Karla, for that. That's very, very insightful. I guess, Dominic, that's music to your ears, is it? The thought that maybe innovation becomes more central to the way that local authorities, the way that government thinks about funding, thinks about projects.
I like to think that the data that INRIX holds can derive great insight. It needs to be melded potentially with other data sets to increase its value and its use in the user case. But I'm always interested in driving innovation with regards to delivering more out of data. I have this adage, which is data everywhere, not a drop to drink, because actually we're absolutely smothered with data, but actually seeing our way through it is actually one of the key things that we have today. And many years ago, if you said, oh, what's a data scientist? Nobody would know. But today, everybody seems to know what a data scientist means, because they are somebody that can actually navigate through data to derive insights. And obviously, INRIX derives a number of key insights, but there's lots of other insights that can be driven out of the data. But it's actually understanding what is it that people actually want. And, a lot of innovation comes out about actually coming up with something that actually people, they didn't quite realize they wanted. And actually, it's really useful. And a lot of startups and everything else are in that space where there are a lot of them that don't quite make it, but there are a few that really, really do make it. And actually, it's not that difficult sometimes. It's amazing when you think of the likes of Uber. What did they actually do? They allowed you to hail a taxi cab from a mobile phone rather than raising your hand at the side of the road and waiting for a driver to go by. That was fundamentally it, but it was huge.
Absolutely. So, Hannah, did you employ, not personally, did you employ a data scientist in TFGM? Do you know?
So we did actually already have a data analytics team. So they did a lot of the highways data and sat within the highways team. But I think that was kind of progressed more, looking at data sets from rail and bus and Metrolink, and kind of we have like a weekly drumbeat that kind of the customer information team gather, and that's looking at the whole network and kind of the impacts and what's happened that week and how it's impacted on the different modes. And obviously that's progressed over time with different patterns and insights, and what were those impacting factors. So was it people going back to school, people starting to go back to work, was it the opening of retail, and just as things have changed, which obviously they have many times, looking at those insights. But yeah, we're quite lucky, which I'm sure a lot of local authorities aren't, that they didn't have those data teams in place. But again, we were still looking at sharing data, so we were getting data from the actual local authorities. So like some people had vivacity sensors that we didn't have access to, so we looked at kind of getting those APIs and getting those on our system as well, and then just gathering it from as many sources as we could, and making use of what we had.
And do you think, based on your experience, do you think that's something that more local authorities should be thinking about employing data scientists as well as traffic engineers? Do you think that's something that more local authorities should be thinking about?
I think so. Yeah, I think there's a big benefit in how we do that, and there's a big interaction between the data team and how the control center operates, and kind of looking at that integration and gathering the insights. So we're using the data like operationally, but also strategically as well, for looking at planning and where we need to make changes to the network, and kind of like hotspots, congestion hotspots, and that kind of thing. But I think, yes, definitely there's a big interaction, and I think that goes like between the data team and the control center, and then kind of the ITS team as well, because we're looking at how we can like integrate crowdsourced data into UTC, and we've done some work with TRL on that, and Waze data and the kind of events data that comes into that, and how that kind of impacts on congestion and incidents on the network as well.
Great, thank you. So just picking up on a point that Karla made earlier about some of the unintended benefits, and one of them is being able to wear slippers, but another one, of course, is the ability to attend multiple events in one day. And apparently there was a joint ITS Ireland ITS UK event earlier today that Jenny Martin was at, and she that event, the question was raised about whether we need to include younger people more when we set policy. Karla, do you have a view on that?
I do, and I completely agree. I think that there's a lot of work that's going on with organisations, certainly that I'm involved in, such as ITS UK, the Highway Sector Council, with regards to skills and that development of skills, and how we can make this sector more appealing to younger people, whether that is whether we go down more the gamification route or the data side. What do we need to do to bridge that gap so we can get more people involved, and more younger people involved, because they've got such, certainly the younger generation who've always had phones and don't remember life before phones. So that we need opinions of people like that as well, so that we don't just get too crusty, and that we really bring in that new fresh approach of people who've never known anything different other than the digital age of transport. So I definitely think that they've got an extremely valuable view. It should be included.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Dominic, as a company that kind of straddles sort of software development and transport, I guess you have a lot of software developers around the world, and I guess they generally are younger people. Do you find they're generally more attracted by the software development than the transport? I'm guessing the answer is yes.
I think you've answered the question already, Darren. I'm going to say our data science team is of a younger generation, and they enjoy most actually playing with the data and deriving insight out of the data that actually hasn't been sought before, and thinking about it in a different way. So I traditionally have come from a transport background. I cut my teeth at the Transport Research Laboratory, went on into a consultancy and was very much into traditional manner. And I've thoroughly enjoyed, sitting back and listening to the data scientists around the different way in which they think about what I would call the traditional problems we have, and actually the ways in which they answer those in a different way with a different approach. And I think we need to be, as an industry, very minded of this, that we are traditional in terms of how we do certain things, and there are good reasons for that, but there are other ways of, and we talk about insight, it's the new hot word, let's say, or outcome, but outcome is another one that I like to mention. So, there are other ways which we can deliver outcomes. It might not necessarily be exactly the same way. It might not be to the same benchmark, but actually does it deliver what you want to within reason and actually stack up from a business case sense of view? And I think there's a lot of merit in terms of exploring some of those approaches and challenging the traditional.
Good, thank you. I think, as we all know, most young people in their last years at school are just yearning to come and work for a local highway authority. That's really where young people want to be when they leave school. Seriously, not. Shall I be a rap star or a footballer, or shall I be a traffic signals engineer? I think it is a debate that most young people have at some point. So Hannah, are there any initiatives in your organisation to try and get people into it, get youngsters interested in the kind of work you do? Because you must again be sort of starting to feel that skills shortage problem.
Yeah, definitely, we do feel the skills shortage, but I think in some of the projects we've got a cab project, which is looking at a connected autonomous vehicle running from Stockport railway station to Manchester Airport, working with Westfield Technologies, and they are engaging in schools using like little type autonomous buggies and visiting schools, which is quite good. They're engaging with colleges and universities as well, so getting people involved there. And I know kind of traditionally the road safety teams and that have always engaged with schools, but I think it probably needs to go further. Just on a personal level, my little boy was really keen for me to come to school to do the talk that the parents do, which is quite an American thing, I thought, but that's what they were asking for. And I was really actually proud that he thought that what I did and the kind of being involved in connected and autonomous vehicles was so exciting that he wanted his mum to come and talk at school. So that did make me quite proud. So he's interested anyway.
It's great to know that there is at least one class of one school in Warrington that I was a class full of people that want to be CAV engineers. That's great. That's great to know for the future. So Karla, I know you've got a particular interest in this and working with ITS UK in this area. Have you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the keys really is through the STEM ambassador program. Myself, I'm a STEM ambassador, and if you have particular skills in this area, I would encourage anybody who's in the audience today to consider being a STEM ambassador. Most larger organisations allow you time to away from your day job to go into schools and teach about things like this. And as Hannah said, we can go into schools and talk about autonomous vehicles, but we can also go into school and talk about how you can make batteries out of lemons and things like that. There's so many things that really attract kids to understanding, the basics of hydrogen and made out of Lego and things like that. We've seen some great projects that you can do through the STEM program to get more and more youngsters involved. And my little boy's the same as you, Hannah. He seems to think that I work with flying cars and things like that. So can I come in and talk about that, and VR goggles, and he wants the whole class to do some VR VR stuff, and but he's interested in it. It floats their boat a little bit more than some of the regular mathsy type stuff. So I think the more we can do that, the better. And they're the kind of things that we're working with, we're looking at through ITS. The other things are, with university courses, can we provide a module for certain university courses so that that we really get into some of those course modules as a whole aspect, so they learn about ITS, for example, as part of their degree in transport studies or whatever it's called.
Great, thank you. Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with all that. This is something that as an industry we really do need to be doing more of. Right, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, so what I want to do is set each of the three panelists an absolutely impossible task. If I'd have asked you this year to predict what 2020 would be like, you'd have all got it hopelessly wrong. So I'm now going to ask you just for a minute just to describe what you hope in terms of transport. Where do you hope we are in 12 months' time? When we do this Fireside Chat again in December 2021, where do you hope we are? So Dominic, I'll start with you and set you the impossible task of predicting the future.
Wow. Good question. Let me get my crystal ball. Obviously, I'd like to see us as a nation and as across the world actually to be out of this pandemic and things to I'm going to say stabilize. We are habitual in terms of what we tend to do as humans and from a behavioral context, and everybody's mentioned the new normal. I would like there to be a bit more stability in terms of what that is, not so much change, and us to return to this new normal. Will it be different to what it is or what we were used to seeing? Most definitely, given the events that we've gone through. I still think that we as people will want to see each other and not over this medium. It works brilliantly during this time. However, I think there will be a restabilization in terms of what that new normal looks like. And I would suggest that it would not necessarily be what it was previously, but it probably won't be too far away from what it was before, because that's what we yearn for. But I'm talking more from a behavioral context, from a people point of view, and business. And obviously business will interact differently, and we will be outside of Europe. So will we be summering more on Bournemouth Beach? I don't know. I'll leave it there, because otherwise I could occupy the rest of the time remaining.
There's some interesting thoughts. I completely agree. Hannah, I'll set you the impossible task of telling us where we'll be in 12 months' time.
Yeah, I think as Dominic said, all the homework it has its benefits, but I think I would like to return to at least half and half. And I think that in itself could maybe have benefits, because transport network wouldn't be as congested, there wouldn't be as much impact on air quality, but there'd be a balance. I think we obviously need to look at how we get people back on public transport, but take the benefits of the move towards active travel and build on those, and look at some of the kind of mobility hub kind of projects and how we look at that. But yeah, I don't know. It is an impossible task.
It is, but that's all good stuff. That I completely agree. And Karla, finally, what are your views on this?
I would like to think that we've responded to most of the challenges and that we've talked about, with public transport, car sharing, for example, in a positive way. Before all this happened, if you cast your mind back, we were looking at all of those innovations to get congestion down and get traffic off the roads. So I hope that we can learn from the issues that we've had this year and the different plans we've put in place to respond to those challenges, so the different solutions. So I hope that we're in a place in 12 months' time where we've learned from things that have happened this year positively, and that there are more people inactive travel, that there are, you know, where we'll be with micro-mobility. And so I think as long as we can say that we've positively learned from a lot of stuff and it's gone in the right direction, and we have, you know, we're closer to that net zero goal than we were 12 months before all of this happened, you know, 2 years ago. By next year, then I think we'll be in a much better place.
Absolutely. Just thinking back to how many of us in previous times would have taken a flight and spent a night in a hotel to attend a 2-hour meeting and then fly back again. And I really do hope we don't get back to that. But similarly, the thought before Christmas of a crowded, noisy pub and laughing and seeing friends really does feel like something we want to get back to. And I think when we had the TTF Winter Forum a few weeks ago now, it really struck me that it worked. It was quite good. We had some good interaction, but the thing we missed was the evening in the hotel bar, just networking and socializing. I think we really want to see that back again. I'd like to thank my guests this afternoon. I think that's been a really stimulating conversation, and I thank you all for being open and candid, and for getting into the spirit of just having a bit of a chat about a strange year. So I think we had some really good interaction there. So just thank the three of you for that, and thank you all for joining this. Thank you for coming along this afternoon. I was kind of thinking of a metaphor for where we are now, and the metaphor I came up with was if any of you ever watched the London Marathon, you'll be familiar with the scenes on the Mall at the very end when people are staggering towards the finish line, which is in sight, and they've got 26 miles in their legs, and they're desperately trying to stop the legs from collapsing under them in the last few yards. Well, that's kind of what this year feels like to me. We're nearly at Christmas. We're nearly at the chance to take a break and relax, and maybe we can't go out and meet friends, but we can at least take some time off and recharge our batteries after what's been a fairly hectic, fairly crazy year. So for me, that's where it feels like now. It feels like we're within a few yards of the finish line, and it's nearly there. And I would wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy Christmas and a safe Christmas. Stick by the rules, whatever those rules may be, but try and enjoy yourself. Try and drink a little bit too much and eat a little bit too much, and let's get ready for a slightly brighter 2021, hopefully. So thank you all. And I think the last thing I have to say is that this has been recorded, and it will be available via the TTF website, as many other great resources are via the TTF website. So please go look in a few days' time, and you should be able to see this to replay it and see what fools all the four of us have made of ourselves. And on that note, I'd like I'm speaking clearly for myself, yes. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for those that have joined us. Merry Christmas. Thank you all.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.